You'll often hear that being an expert or guru at something is defined as spending at least 10,000 hours on that thing. In other words, if you've been at something for a good 10,000 hours or more, then you can call yourself an expert or a guru at that thing because you're going to wind up going through all the different situations that arise, all the issues, everything that comes up, and you'll run across all the things you never expected, and you'll get to know it inside and out. The problem with being a so-called guru or an expert, myself included, is of course when you look back, these things begin to make so much sense that you forget where the road of bearing is for people. And so, for instance, let me give you a simple example. When I created the video training series, and I always work against that myself, you know it, because you see how my training goes. I'm as methodical as I can be. I go through the steps as carefully as I can. Well, even when I put out why website traffic exchanges stink, what I noticed was there are people who'd call me and say thanks for that video, because that's exactly what I was doing without understanding why it was not working. And I put it out almost feeling like it was redundant because there was just a point in time when it occurred to me that anybody would go to google.com and look up something like safe lists, free, safe list directory, and see all of these, that they would know that none of them work. Okay, now obviously I'm saying that loosely. I'd have to go through 309,000 of these to verify one case at a time that they don't work. But the concept, the general concept, the model by which they earn is based on something so flawed that it will not work for you. And yet, the biggest trouble that people have is not knowing how to recognize such models. Okay, it's a very, very important concept. So if you were to come here and see these, we have 5.5 million website traffic exchangers. Already go ahead and assume that the model behind a website traffic exchange will generally not work. And beyond that, just the sheer dynamics of it won't work either. Okay, so there are a lot of things to avoid. What about free-for-alls? There's something called free-for-alls. They were also called FFAs. I'm not sure if I'm going to find what I'm looking for here, and it was sort of the answer to the safe list. And so maybe I would just have to type free-for-all. Free-for-alls, again, it's going to be very, very difficult to sort of find these just on the fly like that, I think. Beyond that, there's get guaranteed 5,000 to 10,000 visitors a month, and people will sign up for such services, they'll pay money for such services, or worse yet, they'll spend an ungodly amount of time on one thing or another. Website traffic exchanges are the worst. I would rather hear of somebody that hopped in, spent 20 or 50 bucks on a bunch of ad views and left, and that was it, than get contacted by people who said, I have been clicking away day after day, psychologically hooked to this thing, and finally spent some money, and none of it worked, and I'm out. Whether they spent money or not, the time is worse. Anybody that looks back and tries to recover money versus looking ahead and creating new money, right? Look ahead, look forward. Don't try to recover pennies on dollars that you spent before, to excess. Don't do that. I've run across people who spent all day every day doing that with all the deals they made in the past, and most of that time was spent trying to recover. They're not thinking about expansion or new business or new models. They were literally, if you count the man hours that you spend looking back and therefore not developing something new, it's extraordinary. You could have gotten something new developed. Then I have people that say, well, I'm sort of trying to perfect a business that just doesn't lose money. And I'll say, can you name any such thing? Even at a high end. I don't care, credit cards. Is it all money in and no money out inevitably? Is there no loss? And the answer is, of course not, because there are collection agencies. We all know that the credit card industry, the phone industry, internet industry, anything you can think of, rent, has losses, right? And what you're trying to do in those businesses is make your gains outweigh your losses. Well, if you're always focused on trying to recover your losses, you see how the gains drop dramatically, and you're forced to have to recover a lot more on your losses yet. In other words, the psychology is all wrong. Okay, I went sideways on that just to sort of illustrate some mental thought approach, but let me come out of that because I want to get back to this. This is more important. Okay, let's start somewhere, shall we? Let's just start somewhere. So what I'm going to say is this. I'm going to say in the old days on planet Earth, the internet was pretty young. All right, and there weren't too many things to do on it yet. Nobody had come up with website traffic exchanges. Nobody had come up with safe lists or free for alls or link exchanges or backlink services or anything else you could think of because these ideas were new. All right, people didn't have a model to follow. They had to come up with the concepts on their own, basically. And so back then, everybody was pretty innocent, and people weren't trying to create corrupt systems really, because why? Everybody was open and ready and willing to dive into something new and interesting, and they were all curious, and it was easier to find anything you were looking for. And people tended to create new systems that had good, useful, serviceable functions, or at least they created systems that sounded good in theory and may have worked well, may have not, but were producing some kind of cash. Now, the most important thing to look at when you look at any service out there isn't how it supposedly works for you. There's always a pitch, there's always the you part, and how it works for you. Either it makes everything easy for you, or it's cheap and somebody else will do it, or whatever the case may be. Let's talk about models, because really, when I hit the internet in 2002, my primary goal, I just got out of university, and I had two bachelor's degrees, and I really got a very good education in finance, international business, and had some teachers that were extraordinary. One fellow helped the UN develop nations every so often. He was a senior advisor to the World Bank. He was a presidential advisor to Carter. A lot and concepts like foreign corrupt trade practices and so forth. A lot of input and a lot of development, a lot of interesting concepts. And so I was exposed to quite a bit of stuff. And when I hit the internet in 2002, I was extremely new on a computer. I was just pretty much learning it all from scratch. I didn't know much about Word, much about Excel, much about Outlook. Didn't figure out Outlook for like a year. And I was tearing around on the internet. And here was my goal. My wife was doing the work while I was home all the time. All right. She was supporting both of us. We both agreed to it. She just put her faith in me. Me being the wild, crazy workaholic I can be anyway, military background and a lot of self-discipline that came out of nuclear physics, training in the military, and boy, do they teach you hard. You will learn or you will drop and give them 40, you know. In any case, I really learned to think about big complex systems all together in my head. If you have to build a nuclear power plant in your head and you make a tiny little adjustment to one part of the plant way over here, then how does it trickle effect throughout the entire closed system? How is the entire system affected by that thing? And I've dealt with a lot of closed systems later that were also quite complex, especially when I got into finance and international business. I realized that there were a lot more stakeholders, people that were affected by changes in things, and so on. So it taught me to think about the box itself. How big is it really? How many components are involved? How are they all affected by any one thing? And so when I hit the internet in 2002 on my wife's dime, just trying to learn, and I'm spending chunks of it on little tools. And what I did was hit it with a goal. This goal, I hit it with the mental attitude that, okay, I'm hopping on the internet where I know most people don't make money. Okay. And I'm going to figure out why. I'm going to figure out how many different things are really out there, and everything else is sort of a replication of that, just some new variant on the same thing. And it turns out to be not whether it's a website traffic exchange or a safe list, but models. How was the model built? Well, were the components that made the model work for the guy who invented it in order to eat, to get paid. So when you learn the models that exist online, then you can fairly evaluate everything you see. You can start to recognize the symptoms of something that's going wrong. You can recognize whether something is propagating in the right direction. And as technical as that comes across as I'm wording it just on the fly, fact of the matter is most of it is common sense when you know enough of the pieces involved. So let me step back. In the old days, as I said, the internet was quite young. And with it being young, people were developing things that were new and interesting and probably valuable, most of them. And so they'd put them out there. And guys would get involved and the thing would work. And the people who invented them would find a way to monetize on them as they go, either before they set up or afterward. And they'd start to monetize. and everything would be fine.